What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the channel for another interview for one of my favorite shows on TV right now. Richie Moriarty for Ghosts. I've said this to you many a times, but I have to keep saying it because this show just keeps brightening my day. Congratulations.
Oh, thanks so much. I'm so glad you're enjoying it. It's been so fun to make, so we always love hearing that people are enjoying it too.
You feel it. That feeling is infectious. I love watching this ensemble more than anything. So I have a couple of random, I'm calling them rapid fire. They're not rapid fire. Some of these will take you some time to answer, but just a couple of random questions to get to know you a little bit more, beginning with one of my favorite acting questions to ask. What is your absolute favorite part of the acting process? Rehearsing, putting your costume on for the first time. But then I also want the opposite, not necessarily your least favorite, but a part of the process where you either see room to grow for yourself or an opportunity to try something new.
Yeah, both really good questions. I think my favorite part of the acting process is like the first take on a new project, because I love meeting, to me, acting is all about the ensemble and the people we're doing it with, but it's really, really fun to see both, I guess, in the first rehearsal and in the first take, how your scene partners are going to play the scene. And I feel like there are always pleasant surprises and a really nice window into how your performers approach the work. So I love that part of it. The thing that's obviously a bummer, especially even with Ghosts, is being away from home. Like as wonderful as Montreal is, and as much as we love being up there and making the show, it's hard. We're gone from home for half the year. So the logistics of that, especially when you have little kids like I do, is tricky. So I think the more I do this kind of work, the more I understand why it's stressful on families, So yeah, that's the most difficult part.
Very, very understandable. I want to follow up on your first answer to that big old compound question there. Do you remember your very first take on the Ghost set? And I don't know, what kind of expectations did that leave you with? And then how did it compare to your experience moving forward?
Gosh, that's such a good question. I'm trying to remember the first thing we shot in the pilot. I think the first thing we ever shot for Ghosts was Asher Grodman, who plays Trevor, has a speech in the pilot where he's talking about this like epic birthday party, the Tara Reid birthday party that he went to. And he's sort of standing in front of all of us in the living room, and we're all listening to him, regale us. And I think I introduce him as like, today the talk of the week is being given by Trevor. And then he comes up and talks about like this Tara Reid birthday party. But I remember it being so exciting because like it's, first of all, I had no idea how Asher was going to play Trevor. I've only seen Trevor on the page. I've only seen any of these characters on the page. So it was just really cool because everyone chimes in and interrupts his story. And you got an immediate sense for like what this world was going to feel like with these ghosts from very different backgrounds and time periods, and how we were going to sort of meld as a group. And I'm sure you've heard some of us talk about this too, but we had such an interesting entree into shooting the pilot. Typically, you're cast, you go to LA, you're shooting a pilot within like weeks of, it's a very short process. It can be very fast. And we went out to shoot the pilot 2 days before March 13th, 2020. So like we were out there getting ready in our costumes, perfecting wardrobe, since we're going to be in this same wardrobe every day of the show. And then we were sent home before we shot a single thing. So we had this weird 8-month period of time where we were sort of like, on text chains with each other constantly as a cast, and getting on Zoom, every couple weeks to kind of check in with each other. But we really bonded as a group going through this weird pandemic experience, and this experience of like booking what felt like a dream job and then hoping like heck that it wasn't going to go away and disappear. So by the time we actually got to shoot the pilot in December of 2020, we were all friends. We all felt like we really had a connection. Aside from a couple people who joined us very last minute in the cast, most of us were there, with each other for 8 months, kind of supporting each other through this craziness. So that was a very, I think, beneficial thing for us in that we were able to bond before we even got to shoot something. So it was I think it contributed a lot to the sort of chemistry that we have.
I'm ruining my little game with many follow-up questions, but something you just brought up a little earlier made me curious. Which character changed the most from your initial read of the script to what that particular actor brought to the role on set?
Oh man, that's such a good question. I think, gosh, I'm literally like going through the cast in my head, and every single person surprised me in different ways. I was at UCB at the same time that Brandon Scott Jones was in New York before we booked Ghosts. So I knew of him. He and I, probably talked a handful of times, but we're not friends. But I, really respected him and loved him as an improviser and really enjoyed watching him on stage at UCB. And it was really, really fun to see what he brought to Isaac, because there were a couple. I actually tested for the role of Pete on the same day that other actors were testing for Isaac. And so I saw the potential other people who would have played Isaac, and they would have been so vastly different. Great probably in many ways, but just different. So it's always so interesting to see who steps into a role and how they make it singularly theirs. Alberta, Danielle was not the original choice for Alberta. That casting changed over the pandemic because of conflicts. And I think all the time about how drastically different it would have been to not have Danielle, who is just so magnificent in that role, to not have her be Alberta. It's fascinating. And like Roman was cast relatively last minute. He was cast I think the week we shot the pilot in December. And, I think about that all the time too. He's become like a family member basically, and is just so outstanding in that role. So, it's I think everybody is just incredible at what they do, and they make it singularly theirs.
It's so true. You feel it when you're watching it. I have to now pit the family against one another because I'm going to keep bringing this topic up because I'm obsessed with Scrabble, and I love hearing about how brutal your Scrabble competition got. And when I was talking to Rebecca about it, she told me that you were especially good at Scrabble. So now I need to know, who was your biggest competition? Who was number 2 on the most competitive list?
Oh man, probably Danielle. Danielle is a fierce competitor. She's very good, but she's also when I beat her, she's mad at me. She does not let things go easily. So I have to be very careful with how I approach Danielle after a Scrabble win. And I really have to credit my dad. My dad and I have played Scrabble since the time I was 10. He kind of used Scrabble as a way to talk about words and vocabulary and the roots of words. We kind of used it a lot around SAT prep time too. He used it as a nerdy way to get into, the definitions of words. And my dad is an incredible Scrabble player, better than I am. And I love playing with him. He and I always have great games that go into. So yeah, I got to credit my dad for the Scrabble skills.
This follow-up question might be taking a step too far, but who of the Ghost cast was the worst at Scrabble?
Oh man, there's always, I feel like in every group when you bring up Scrabble, there's always one person who's like, oh yeah, I'm amazing at Scrabble. And they're not. I think, I'm trying to remember, you know what? I'm going to call Devin out. It's Devin. It's Thorfinn. Dev, I think immediately upon starting to play with me, he's so competitive. He's used to play football. He's competitive in everything he does. He's competitive when we play ping pong on set. But when he realized that he wasn't going to easily beat me in many games, he got very mad. And he's since gotten a lot better, but I think he realized oh no, these people are playing on a different level.
Yeah, if you say you're good at Scrabble, you better live up to the hype that you're building for yourself.
Yeah, you have to.
All right. I want to ask you a personal question based on Little Pete's obsession with Pete's Handbook. I want to know the book, the movie, the show that you yourself know so well that if anyone made even the slightest change to it, you would pick up on it.
Yeah. I mean, you know what? This is so strange. There are a lot of things. There are a lot of like cultural touchstones, but I'll give you a couple. I feel like Saturday Night Live is just always going to be an answer. I don't think I've ever missed an episode of Saturday Night Live in my lifetime, and I've watched plenty. I have like season 1 box set, in my living room. So like when Lorraine Newman joined us for an episode, what a joy to like have her on set with us. But SNL has always been a touchstone for me, and like always been something that is like where I think I found my comedic voice, when I found these like weirdos who were writing these insane sketches and acting in these insane sketches. I think it was a big part of my comedy development. The movie for me that I've probably seen the most is Good Will Hunting. So I went to college in Boston. I lived in Boston for about 15 years. And Good Will Hunting, I think came out in 98. Which was my senior year in high school. But then like by the time I got to college, it was on, we had like a college movie channel, and it was just always on our college movie channel because we were in Boston. It had just won the Oscar. It was like this thing. So like every night when I'd come home at the end of the day with my friends who I lived with, we would watch Good Will Hunting, and I've probably seen it 75 times and can quote that movie backwards and forwards. So that is one of those that's my Pete's Handbook is the Good Will Hunting script. You give me any scene and I can quote it to death.
That is an excellent choice. I love that, especially because I have Air on the brain, and Ben Affleck and Matt Damon just like that. It's so good.
It's so good. I was astonished. We have to talk real quick about Chris Messina playing the agent. I mean, outstanding. Like everyone is so outstanding in it. Chris Messina blew me away. Matt Damon's so good in it. Jason Bateman, perfect. I mean, he's perfect. He's so good in it. Just like what a great film. I really enjoyed it.
Chris Messina is one of those actors that I will always think never gets the credit he deserves for making so much out of every ounce of screen time he gets in roles like that.
Truly. And that was the perfect example. He's like he's on the other end of a phone for most of the movie, but he is like just crushing, like stealing scenes in whatever way you can when literally your scene partner isn't in the room with you. I was just so impressed with what he did in that film.
What, do you know how they shot that?
No.
They actually shot that where I believe Matt Damon was like in the next room over so they could be performing the scene together. And when I heard that, I'm like, why isn't every phone conversation scene shot that way?
It's so frustrating to shoot scenes like that when they aren't, because like oftentimes you'll have like a script supervisor reading the other end, and depending on who the script supervisor is, you're not getting a lot of energy back. So, brilliant move. It's so nice to have somebody to truly play off of, especially when like you're going to feed off of their energy and play opposite that energy. So yeah, that's a brilliant way to do that. It doesn't surprise me they did it that way.
All right, I have one more sillier question, because I think I asked this to the other group at San Diego Comic-Con, and I kind of love this thought. So let's say you, as in real you move into a house, a manor, whatever, and there are ghosts there. You need to tell somebody in your life. Who do you tell about the ghost that will actually believe you that they're really there? I
think, assuming I'm living with my wife and she's also experiencing the ghosts in the scenario, I think I'm telling my sister. My sister, I think, is one of those people that just like implicitly trusts me and would actually believe the insane story that I was telling her. My parents, my mom would be hilarious. My mom would be like, "Oh, please. Oh, please." She wouldn't buy it for a second. My dad, I don't know. I bet he's a bit of a skeptic too. But yeah, my sister, I think I could get on board.
Are you an older sibling?
I am a younger sibling. I have an older sister named Colleen, who's like my number one fan and just the best. She's the best. She and her family are some of the dearest people in my life.
I was going to say, because I have a younger sibling and I feel like I can get her to believe absolutely anything, but I think I'm just like throwing the older sibling weight around in a way that I've kind of earned over the years. So
my sister did the same. My sister threw that weight around all the time. Like, wouldn't even let me walk through doorways. She'd be like, "What's the password?" And I'm like, what are we doing here? Just a nightmare when we were younger. And now we're like best friends.
I identify with everything you just said way too much.
Yeah.
All right, going back to the very beginning of your ghost journey briefly, what would you say is the biggest difference between how you first pictured Pete when you first got your very first script, maybe shot the pilot, compared to who he turned out to be when you finally got the chance to shoot the rest of the season?
This is a great question, because I have like a very clear story here. They're like, in the casting process, I went in, this was like, pre-pandemic. So we went in person to the CBS building in New York, and I read for the role with a casting director, and I read the scenes that I was given once as I interpreted the character. And then their only note to me was like, great, let's do one more and just make it bigger. Just go bigger with it. And so I did another version that was like way bigger energy, probably closer to the Pete you're seeing on screen today. And when I got the call that they wanted me to fly to Los Angeles to test for the role, I had to ask. I said, hey, I said to my manager, I said, could you ask them which take they preferred? Because I did two very different reads on this character. And so my manager went back to the casting, and casting said the second take, the bigger take. So I was like, great. And it's funny because like when I forget if this was when I was testing or if it was right before we shot the pilot, but Joe Port, one of the showrunners, said to me, he said, hey, we've been using Ned Flanders as like a touchstone for this character. Like, we imagine this guy as very Flanders-esque. And again, that wasn't, I was seeing him much more as kind of my dad, who's a little more understated and smaller, still like chipper and happy, but not quite Flanders level. So that really informed how I played it, because like, anytime you hear from the showrunner, like, hey, this is how we're envisioning a thing, it's like, well, great. Let me, see your vision to fruition as much as I can. So I think, Pete is much more, I guess, like, there's just like, he's turned up to 11. He is Flanders in a lot of ways. So yeah, it's definitely a more amplified version of what I was first seeing.
Little Flanders with a whole lot of warmth, though.
Totally.
All right, taking a step further now. So we were talking a little bit about this at Comic-Con, but I'm curious for your answer in season 2 in particular. I was asking you if there were any particular scenes that redefined the character the most for you, where every scene you shot after you found being influenced by that particular scene. You had mentioned the moment in season 1 when he found out that his wife had been cheating on him. Is there a moment that had that same effect on you for the character in season 2? Now, obviously stopping short of the episode that is being revealed this week, Ghost Father of the Bride.
Yeah, because there definitely is a moment in Ghost Father of the Bride, but I think the scene where the ghost hunter scene where Flower and Thorfinn end up in the ghost trap, and basically Thorfinn ends up in there because Pete chickens out and doesn't want to touch the trap, and Pete does have to have this like come to Jesus moment where he's like, hey, are you going to sacrifice yourself to save your friends, or are you going to stand by and watch idly while they potentially perish? So that was a big scene, I think, for Pete. Pete over the course of season 2 especially has like learned lessons but seemingly forgot them very quickly, and like he's been on this roller coaster of like figuring out how to truly stand up for himself and get some gumption and actually like do the hard work of being a good friend and supporting the people around you. So I think that was a really defining moment for him, where he kind of said, okay, like, I'm going to go into this ghost trap. I don't know what's going to happen, but it's time for me to step up.
I love that episode. All right. I have one more big, broad question before I focus just on Ghost Father of the Bride here.
Yeah.
I love talking about the value of a good scene partner. And I know it might be hard to come up with just one answer to this question, but can you give me an example of a time on set when a scene partner you had made all the difference, where, if they weren't there giving you what you needed, you wouldn't have been able to reach something in Pete or just crush something you had to do in a particular scene?
Yeah. Rose McIver comes to mind immediately. Rose is so good at what she does, and she's such a supportive scene partner. And there's a scene, I think it is in the Pete's Wife episode, where I'm basically trying to convince her. I show her where the manual is. There's a manual like hidden in the pantry, and we have this scene where I'm basically saying like, look, get that manual up there, use this to get my wife back to the mansion so that I can see my family. And it is kind of a last resort for Pete, and he's really begging. And the energy that Rose gives back in that scene, you know, as Sam, she's just like, I don't know, there are certain performers who totally change your approach to a scene. Like, I can have an idea of how I want to play a scene, but then when I saw the way she was playing that scene, she plays it so sweetly and so earnestly, and she like, you can feel in her face that she has a relationship with this guy now, and she wants to help him. And I think it really changed my performance in that scene. And I adore Rose, and I love that, like, she's the you know, our number one, and she's such a wonderful tone with us, and she has such a hard job in this show. It is so difficult doing what she does, but she does it so well.
That is such a beautiful answer. I love that so much.
Thanks.
All right, the time has come. I'm going to put up the spoiler warning, particularly for Ghost Father of the Bride, which, when this interview is released, everyone can watch it on Paramount Plus. If you haven't watched it on CBS, go check it out. You just push pause on this video, you go watch the episode, then you come right back, push play, and it begins right here. It is that easy. All right. So digging into some particular moments here, one thing that I really loved was the urgency that Pete had in this episode, and how his frustration comes out. Like, for example, when he gets into the kitchen with Sam, he's really aggravated that none of his ideas were approved. And it was making me wonder, do you think that frustration comes mostly with, you know, him butting heads with his ex-wife, with Carol, and the lasting resentment that came from her having cheated on him? Or is it more so driven by, like, a genuine desperation that his daughter could have the wedding of her dreams?
I think it's certainly a combination of both. I mean, like, Pete is definitely, I think, with some distance, he now has like 40 years since he was a married man. And especially in this, like, wedding planning process with his ex-wife, he's being reminded of all the reasons why this was not a great relationship. You know, he was not in a marriage that worked that well. There was a lot of sniping when they were alive, and there's even sniping now that he's dead. And, like, you know, I think there's a lot of frustration there, especially because he is seeing some of these moments as, like, a barrier to potentially having the wedding that he wants to have for his daughter. Some of it too is just frustration of being dead, right? Like, he wants to be able to voice these things to the people that can actually affect the change. So I think a lot of it too is just that frustration of, like, not being fully present in the way that people who are living are. And then, of course, he adores his daughter more than anything in the world. So he wants to be able to share this moment with her. And when it seems like that's slipping through his fingers, he's, I think, terrified and really sad, you know, to think that there is an opportunity to potentially see your daughter get married when you're dead is, like, incredible to him. And to see that potentially slipping away, I think, is heartbreaking. So yeah, there are a lot of different frustrations there, but I think it's like, it's the wife, it's being dead in general, and, you know, potentially losing this opportunity with his daughter.
So bringing up being dead in general, and the answer to this question might just be a flat out no. And I've thought about this throughout the series, but in particular, I felt myself, like, wanting to reach for something like this in this moment for him. Have you all and the showrunners and the writers ever come anywhere close to letting another living in on the ghost's secret, and then maybe kind of pulled back and veered back in the other direction?
Which ghost secret?
Like the idea that there are ghosts in the manor, like where Sam and Jay tell another person so that a ghost can indeed interact with a living in some sense. Yeah. Or more so than they have been.
There have certainly been moments where I think potentially we've wanted to say, like, wouldn't she just tell them? But I think there is, right now she's only told Bela, right? Like, Jay's sister. So she's the only one that sort of has a window into this. And that didn't necessarily go great when she first told her. So I think there is this, like, real fear that Sam can be seen as a woman who is unstable and not well when we'd potentially tell people this. But I do feel like, I hope this show has a long life. And I do feel like there is a lot of fun to be had in that revelation and in revealing that to different people in the Ghosts universe. So I feel like it will happen. I don't think we've seen the last of that reveal of her, sort of supernatural ability, because I feel like there's just a lot of fun to be had there. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see more of that in the future.
I feel like I'd be the absolute worst in Sam's shoes, and I wouldn't be able to help myself and just blab to everyone. And
100%.
I'd probably cause some problems with that.
100%. I think about that all the time. Like, if it were me in my life, I would be like, I'm seeing ghosts everywhere. Like, I'd be just like fully screaming it to the rooftops.
If you had your choice and you could have one living character that's appeared on the show be in the know in this sense, who would you pick? Why? And maybe how could an interaction with Pete influence him for the better?
Gosh, that's such a good question.
I feel like it's especially hard for you to answer because there are so many family members in play now.
I know. Like, Pete is
and
in a
if you could only pick one, which one?
He's in a unique situation that way. Like, I would say Carol, but I don't think that would go well. Having Pete's wife be fully in on the secret, again, Pete doesn't really get along with his wife. So maybe it is Laura. Maybe the actress that plays Laura, her name's Holly Gautier Frankel. She's so great. She's so great in this episode. It's always so nice to have, like, she had a really small part in the Pete's Wife episode in season 1, like, great kind of guest star that comes in and does it's the hardest job in TV, is like being a guest star or co-star and coming in and doing one small scene. 'Cause like, you're waiting all day for it. There's all this build up. You don't really know how the show functions. And she knocked that out of the park in that episode. And to see her get something a little meatier in this episode, it's always so nice, especially like from a series regular perspective, to see someone who you can totally, like, I was there not too many years ago, like doing those guest stars and co-stars and like trying to find my footing. And she's just so good. And it was so nice to have her back to do more. So yeah, maybe like that would be really fun she even says in this episode, like, I feel Dad's presence here. So maybe she would be someone who'd be a little more susceptible to like believing Sam and understanding the situation. So yeah, I'll say Laura.
I wouldn't mind seeing that happen. So bringing her up, and also going back to an idea that I brought up a couple of times during this episode, the moment where he gets to walk her down the aisle, that is a pretty significant life moment there. So to tease what's to come maybe at the end of this season and what lies ahead for Pete, how do you think that particular experience is going to change him going forward?
Man, I think like, the nice thing about seeing that scene on the page and getting to perform it is that, like, we all have experiences where we've either been to weddings of friends or gotten married ourselves and haven't been able to have loved ones with us. My wife's mom wasn't able to come to our wedding because she was too sick to travel, and she actually passed away the day after we got married. And there are, I think, like, real significant moments like that for everybody. So to be able to sort of play out this fantasy in a lot of ways where, even though your loved one has passed, we all hope they're there in presence somehow. So to be able to sort of like show that, show what so many people hope for, I think, in moments like that was really so cool. And I think I hope that moment for Pete brings a lot of closure in a lot of ways for his family. Like, again, these moments when his family are at the mansion are so special and critical and give him a window into this world that continues without him. But in that scene, he was able to be part of it again for a minute, even though he's like yelping in pain for half of it because he's linking his arm with hers. But yeah, I think there's real, that's one of those monumental life moments that you think about, like being able to see your kids get married, and for him to be able to be a part of that, I think was really special and hopefully provided some closure for him in his, relationship with his daughter.
bringing up the linking of the arms. I feel like I could ask this question about any scene in this show. What is it like kind of figuring out that right balance between that sentimental, heartfelt quality, but also still being able to earn a laugh? Because probably said this to all of you a million times at this point, but your ability to balance and switch back and forth is just absolutely impeccable. And I feel like shouldn't work as well as it does.
No, it really shouldn't, especially with 21-minute long episodes. Like, it doesn't make any sense that they're able to pull it off as well as they do so many times. I think, like the bulk of the credit has to go to Joe Port and Joe Wiseman, our showrunners, because like tonally, that's such a difficult thing to have a network sitcom also be able to pull at heartstrings and shift that kind of energy in such a short time period. Incredibly difficult to do. I think a lot of credit goes to our directors too. Jay Karras, who directed this episode, talked a lot with me about that moment of walking down the aisle. And he, in conjunction with the Joes, we shot that walking down the aisle many different ways. One where Pete was just basically half a step behind her and like with her and, very emotional, but walking behind her. And then the other one where I'm linking with her the whole time and sort of like yelping in pain the whole time. And in the final edit, they really blended those two together where like the first half of it is me kind of with her, but not, linked with her. And then, it's kind of a nice transition where he's like, screw it. Like, I'm going to do the traditional thing and link my arm with her and finish this. So I think tonally too, and Jay even said this as he was directing it, he's like, we're going to see how this plays, because it may be that we see the edit and the best thing for this is just going to be this straight sentimental, moment of you being behind her. But if we can punctuate it with a little of the humor of you linking arms with her and that really hurting you, then we'll do it. And I think, the editors, everybody plays such a critical role in this, and our special effects people too. Like, they had to figure out how can we link arms and make it look like we're really linking arms, even though we're not. So the whole thing just was very impressive how it came together. I was really excited to see that it came together so well.
It is really something else. I'm endlessly impressed by how you and the team do things like that. I'll end with this one here. So now limiting it to the main ensemble of characters, of everybody in the cast, who do you think Pete would have the most to gain from at this point in his afterlife? Which other character do you think he'd benefit from spending more time with in season 3?
I feel like he and Isaac we have a lot more to explore with his relationship with Isaac. Isaac, in a lot of ways, sees himself as the leader of this group of ghosts. He's the general, the commander. And I think Pete also sees himself that way as like the scout troop leader. It's a different leader energy, but similar. And I think like the two of them together have a lot to explore and potentially like work toward both of their advantages in the house. And I'd say like the same about Rebecca Wasaki too, and Hetty's character. Like, I think Pete and Hetty, we haven't explored a lot of their relationship, and it will be really interesting, I think, to dive down deeper into the two of them and how they operate together and what that relationship really is.
I love that you literally could have said anyone, and I would have been sitting here going, yes, totally. More of that, please.
I'm like going through the Rolodex and I'm like, Flower. I mean, Flower all day. Like, like I could say about anybody, but yeah, it's part of the joy of an ensemble like this, right? Is like, we, even 2 seasons in, there is so much left to explore, especially amongst the ghosts, flashing back to their past in the house. Like, show me what 25 years ago was like in the house with Pete and Hetty and Sass, like what were they going through? Like, we've clearly been going through a lot in this house, and we've only really scratched the surface with our relationship. So I'm excited to, learn more about these ghost relationships.
I want to see it all. I have to let you go, but I'm going to say huge congratulations on Ghost, and thank you, because having a show that consistently puts a smile on my face like this show does is very, very important, pretty much always, but it feels like especially now in challenging times, I need Ghost in my life. Congratulations, and thank you for your time today.
Thank you so much, and thank you for being such a nice support for the show. We're very grateful and always love chatting with you.